exciting to hear. I got a call last week that you folks were going to be talking about the church, and the church is something I'm passionate about. And just because I'm passionate about it doesn't mean that it's going the way I think it should go. But I look back throughout history, since Jesus was on the earth and the church was formed, and I'm not sure if the church is ever going on the way people thought it should go. You know, we need to look into some of the characteristics, I think, of what causes that to not be the way we think it should be. I was thinking, I saw some of the notes, John sent me some notes from your chapel on Wednesday, and I really appreciated some of the words that people use to describe the church. A hospital, a place of grace. I love that. And I think that's the church that we all want to be part of. But things get in the way and we struggle with it. One of the things that gets in the way, at least I think for me it does, is I have to ask the question, for whom does the church exist anyway? Is it for me? Or is it for others? Or is it for God? You know, for whom does the church exist? And I often come and say, well, what do I get out of church today? And I wonder if that's really the question that I should be asking. Shouldn't the question really be, shouldn't I be asking, what have I given to the church today? Our culture tells us that we're supposed to be the center of everything. So obviously we ask that question, what did I get out of it? And if we didn't get anything out of it, well then we say, well, that church isn't for me. But today I want to look at some of the things that Jesus said in Luke chapter 14 about the church. And I'm just going to use a few words of description to you. And since you don't have your Bibles, I'm just going to put a few verses up from time to time. But here's the first one in Luke 14. One Sabbath when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. And I put that up there because I want you to know, we often say that Jesus dealt with the people on the margins, which he clearly did. But he also dealt with the prominent people. You know, and part of being the church is from the prominent people, the wealthy people, the most influential, to those who don't have a voice and those who don't have financial means or whatever, working together at God's purpose. And for me, that's a dream of the church. And I don't know if you've ever been with a prominent person before. Maybe who you describe as prominent. I don't think I've been with too many, but it's interesting when you get with it. We don't act the same or the way we usually do because they're a person of influence. A few years ago, I was running the Philadelphia Half Marathon, which, as you know, was 13.1 miles. And I got out at the beginning of the race and was running really pretty hard. It was running pretty fast. And at the 3-mile mark, I got across the 3 mile, there was a little bit of water. I actually took a water cup. And I was reflecting in my mind, can I keep running this fast? Because I'm hurting a little bit, or should I just shut it down and, you know, just cruise on in like I usually do in races? You know what I mean? Just kind of go with the flow. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this voice, a woman's voice, that says, nice pace. And I didn't know. They were talking to me. I turned around and said, nice pace. And there's this woman, and here's who this woman was right here. Oh, there it is. Cecily Tanya. I did a double, triple of them talking to me. She goes, yeah, you're running 6-minute, 15-second miles. You did 3 of them in a row. And that's the exact pace I want to run to reach my goal that I've never reached before. Well, I didn't really want to tell her that I've never run 6-minute, 15-second miles for a half marathon either. And I was at the point of death, right? But since Cecily was there, and she seemed to want to talk to me, and there was nobody else around, she said, is it okay if I run with you? And I said, sure. So we ran together, and believe it or not, she was talking all the time that I was on the point of death. And so we went for mile 3, and then 4 and 5, and we kept going on and on and on and on and on and running. And then I'm thinking, man, at mile, right after the 12-mile mark, they take your pictures. You know, wouldn't it be great for me to get a picture taken with Cecily? And my mind thought about what would it look like for me to be with Cecily Tynan in a picture in a race together, you know. And then the wheels started falling off the car. And at about 11.9 miles, I said, Cecily, I can't go anymore. We got our pace. Hopefully you can finish at your pace. And I got to the finish line, and there she was waiting for me. And she gave me a hug. She said, I made my time today. I want to thank you for running with me. Well, the point was I also ran a minute faster than I've ever run. She helped me. And the word I want to use that I think Jesus wanted for the church is why he went to speak with the prominent people, the others, is a word from physics called synergy. How many knew that word, synergy? Synergy is kind of like 1 plus 1 equals 3. So that day as we were running together, synergy happened. We weren't thinking about our own pain. We were thinking about the goal, and together we were working at it, and it was working out. I wonder what the church would be like if Jesus had succeeded in bringing the influential people together with those with no voice, and synergy would have happened in his purpose, for the purpose of the church. And my hope is that synergy happens for us today. There's some other things that went on in this passage today. Oh, wrong line. Let's see if that works. Can you advance me one? There it is. There's another, when we got to verse 7, he says, he got into the house and he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table. And he told them a parable because of that. It's interesting how we get together and we want to be associated with a high position, right? This is what Jesus specifically says here, because I'll let you advance me. Go ahead. I only have a few slides. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the seat at least in yours. And then the key part of that verse, he says, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. It goes against our culture that strives to always be number one, to not take the top position all the time. But we have a jockeying in position, I think, everywhere we go, and especially in the church. I don't know if you've ever been invited to a wedding. I'm sure you all have. You get to the wedding. One of my favorite parts is when you get to the reception, and there's usually a table there, and you get your card. You know what I mean? And it gives you a table number. And I don't know how you did this line, but I said, table number 6. Where is table number 6? Oh, right there. That's pretty close to the bride and groom's table. I'm pretty important, you know. But if you get table number 22 and it's in the back of the room, you're saying, hey, why am I there? It's human nature to do that. But by the same token, when we buy tickets, I was just up at Broadway last week, and I was looking online for tickets. Where do you think I purchased my tickets? I purchased the tickets that were as close to the front as possible. And I actually remember being there and thinking, I got pretty good tickets here today, you know, compared to all you schmucks out there. You know what I mean? You've been in that situation, I know you have. But that goes against this. Everyone who exalts himself will be humble. I don't think Jesus is against us having the honorable position, but I think he's against taking it for our own self, for our own self-importance. He knows that human beings are attention starved, and we want to look good and feel important, and it leads us to pick the places of honor wherever we are, including the church. And then when we're picking the place of honor and we're talking about loving others, obviously it becomes very hypocritical, which has been a problem for the church over the years. There's also the problem of being in a prominent position and flaunting it. I had Flyers tickets 4 years ago. I bought them, they were right down on the ice, right behind the ball. You want to sit there, it's great. I mean, when they come in, they hit people. I mean, you actually see slobber on the glass. It's tremendous. So I knew I had these tickets. We were a little late getting there. The game had just started. And I looked down and I saw people sitting in my seats. How dare they sit in my seats? That's what I thought. Now, there's a couple ways to handle this situation. I can go down to my seat, show the squatters my tickets, and they will simply get up and move, right? Or, and I chose point number 2, or I can go to the usher and say, "Hi, excuse me, I don't know where my seats are. Could you show me?" And then they go down and they humiliate the people that are sitting there. So I felt much better about that, right? It's a human condition we have. And Jesus talks about that. And the word we need to talk about there is submit. We need to submit and be willing to give up that position in a rightful way. I have often reflected how Jesus dealt with his prominence. Coming into Jerusalem for that triumphal entry, he had every reason to take a position of prominence. So I kind of envision him on that. Did you do that? Good for you. Maybe I did that. Don't you think that's the way it should be? But how did Jesus really come in? Let's see the next slide. I'll take the next slide. Can you imagine? The king of this world, the king of heaven and earth coming in on that. It's taking the lowest position to new heights for me. Show me the next. I want to look at the next verse too. He who humbles himself will be exalted. That's the next part of that verse. But when you were invited, take the lowest place, that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place, then you will be honored in the presence of all guests. Well, that seems like a good idea. Have you ever been in that position? When I was in seminary, we had a guest speaker there, a very well-known speaker. I doubt whether many of you will know his name, but his name was Stanley Horowitz. He's a great theologian at Duke University. Spent the weekend there. He was in the seminary. He was going to have lunch. We had a soup lunch there. And so Stanley Horowitz, we at the seminary gave him the first place in line to eat that day. And we put the dean or Stutzman behind him. And they went out with their soup and they sat in the middle of the room. And I was third. See, that was my perfect position. Not quite on top, but right behind him. So I got my soup and I said, do I sit at that table or not? And I said, no. We'll let somebody else sit here. So I went over in the corner and started eating, and people joined me, and we're eating, and all of a sudden, Dean Stutzman taps me on the shoulder. He says, Mike, could you join Stanley and I over at our table? You see, Stanley is a marathon runner, and he would love to talk to you about running. Of course I'm going to go. So I picked up my soup and my bread. I made sure my shoulders were as broad as possible, and I made sure my posture was perfect as I walked across the room, knowing that I had been elevated to the highest position that day. Why isn't that appealing? The reason is because we don't really know how to engage in humility. Humility, the root of the word humility is harnessed power. I love that. Harnessed power. It's controlling our need for attention and our thirst for ego, even though we have the power to do that. Humility. It's difficult because the more we strive to be humble, I find, the more pride we take in our ability to be humble. And the more power we then accumulate. It almost defines Mennonite, doesn't it, for those of you Mennonites? We are so proud of being the quiet in the land. That are we really the quiet in the land? Are we just the arrogant humble in the land? Humility comes not from intentionally submitting to others, but by intentionally submitting to God. Are we willing to invest ourselves in the church? So when we talk about that idea of striving to be humble, it's more about, are we willing to invest our lives in the church, invest in God for others, and that involves serving. That's my other S word that I have. This passage shows the posture we need to take in order to truly be fruitful in our humility that can come forth, and that's the posture of serving. And Jesus was clearly a model here throughout his life. If you show the next slide, to me, the idea of washing another's feet is the ultimate in serving. Jesus, with his disciples, knelt and washed their feet. He harnessed the power with that loving and serving act. We think we have to do better at this in order to be faithful to Christ. And here's the point. We can't do it. If we try to be humble, we're proud in our humility. If we take the higher position, we're not winning in that way either. That's not the way it's supposed to be. But humility can only come through Jesus. It comes as not something we do, but actually something we are. And it's not about being right. It's about being in relationship. And that takes both submission and service. When I got out of seminary, I came back and I was with my running group. About 11 years ago this happened. And I was with a guy that doesn't come out that often. We were running in the back of the pack. It was mile 10 and looking for something to talk about. So I figured since I'm a pastor, I could ask special questions. So I asked the question, so how's your marriage? And the guy's head snapped around at me like this. And he said, why do you ask? I said, I don't know. I just thought I'd ask. He said, it's terrible right now. So what's going on? He said, we're always bickering with each other. We have small children at home. My wife's home all day, and she does a good job with the kids, and I come home and work's terrible for me. And I come home, and there's a pile of dishes in the sink, and it's relentless. And I say to her, when are you going to wash the dishes? And she said, I'll get to it, and she never gets to it, and it just bothers me. And then I didn't know what to say, but as a new pastor, I thought I had to say something pastoral. So I said, well, what would Jesus do? You know, typical WWJD. And he said, well, what's that supposed to mean? And I said, I have no idea, but I thought it sounded good. So about 3 months later, we happened to be on the same run again, and I said, again, the same question, how's your marriage? And he said, glad you asked. It's great. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, after all our fighting and bickering over the dishes, I finally decided, well, maybe I should just do the dishes if it bothered me. And I turned the water on and started doing the dishes, and all of a sudden my wife was standing next to me just weeping. And she said it's just the one task around the house that she struggles with and she can't stand doing. And we started doing the dishes together, he said, that day on, and talking about our day as we did the dishes. And through his active service, the marriage had been improving. I think that's a little bit what it means to be involved in the church. We serve each other freely, not to get any gain for ourselves, but because it's part of the plan. Well, the final S word I have today is share, and the next passage will show that. Share with everyone. Share our stories. Share what we have. Share forgiveness. Share hope. Jesus says to his host, when you give a luncheon, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, your rich neighbors. If you do, they might invite you back. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. You see, the church has become not a sharing place, but it's been a closed community. Perhaps a positive community, but a community that does not allow the outside in and doesn't look to the outside. We need to be able to share our faith stories with people, to share the love of Jesus, to share the forgiveness that we have received. And even though the church isn't about ourselves and the things we can get, it's really what we want, isn't it? For ourselves, we want a church that is open to all, sharing. That's my vision for the church, a place we can share. Jesus says here that it is not a closed group, and it's a constantly changing group. Everyone is welcome, but everyone is focused not on themselves and where they belong, but working towards a goal. And the word there is team. Many of you, how many of you watched Villanova play the other night? You had to get played for that. What a great game. I mean, in my lifetime, it's the best game that I've seen. Probably will be the best game. The next day, there was some articles. Somebody wrote an article that looked at Wikipedia and defined the word team. I invite you to look. There's a lot there. Here's what one thing said. Team is a group of people linked in a common purpose and are especially appropriate for conducting tasks that are high in complexity and have many interdependent tasks. I think that's the church, right? Common purpose, especially appropriate for conducting tasks that are high in complexity and have interdependent subtasks. Here's a second one. A group does not necessarily constitute a team. In other words, just because you get people together, that's not a team. Just because you get people together in the church, it's not a church. It says here, teams normally have members with complementary skills, and I love it, they use my word, and generate synergy through a coordinated effort which allows each member to maximize their strength and minimize their weaknesses. Team members need to learn how to help one another, help other team members realize their true potential, and create an environment that allows everyone to go beyond his own limitation. When the church is working at synergy, at submitting to each other, at serving and sharing, it becomes a place where we can all experience God's grace. That's a place where it's a team like Villanova. Church team. I'm going to end with one final story. When the church is working like that, I think we can all experience God's grace in the midst of teamwork. When I was a senior in high school, Disney World was pretty new, believe it or not. And my parents decided we're going to take a trip to Florida. And we're going to stop in at Disney World for one day. And the rest of the time we're going to spend visiting my parents' older friends who I didn't know and didn't really want to be part of. But we were going to Florida. One of the things when we were visiting, one of the friends said, I'd like to take you over to Thomas Edison's museum. And I'm thinking, oh boy, what a day this is going to be. You know, here I am with these old people, and now I'm going to be going to this museum. But I remembered something from that tour. It was amazing. And the guy was talking about how Edison was inventing the light bulb. Now imagine all that had to go into that. The circuitry wasn't invented yet, so they had to first invent the circuitry, and then they even had to invent a light bulb, or create a light bulb to see if it worked. And he said there was several high-skilled scientists there. There was some engineers there. Edison was there. And then there was a couple just kids that were interested. That had really no skills at all. They swept the floor and did that kind of stuff. Well, anyhow, they're coming to the culmination of this time. And it's finally time. They had worked with the light bulb, and it took them 19 hours of work to form this light bulb. And Edison said, let's plug it in and see if it works. He handed the light bulb to a 16-year-old boy who was there. And the boy went over, he climbed up the ladder, and as he was trying to plug it in, he fumbled it, and it broke and shattered on the floor. And these scientists were angry, and they didn't know what to do. And Edison said, well, let's just get back at it. They went to bed that night, came back the next day, and they created another light bulb. And then Edison took the light bulb, and he handed it to the same young man. And he said, plug it in. Then he went up the ladder and plugged that light bulb in. If you go down to Edison's place today, at least this happened years ago when I was there, that same light bulb is still in the socket because it was made of materials that aren't going to wear out. Probably the meter just spins as that light bulb's burning. But it spins and sends a great message out to me that we all need a touch of grace from time to time. We need a second chance. That's what the church is about, a team working together, highly skilled people, people that are sweeping the floors, people that are working together for one purpose, and every person is just as important as the other. That team that Edison formed worked with synergy. They worked with submitting to each other. They worked at serving one another. They worked at sharing. And they worked at grace. Now that's a church that I can get excited about. That's the church that I have hope for. In some ways, I say, my generation, we blew it on these points. But I have hope for all of you. Will you join me for a word of prayer? We thank you, God, for the opportunity we have to reflect on the church. Lord, we just ask that you would help us to have the willingness to be involved, to participate, to share our stories, to submit to one another, to serve one another, and to work on a team that we call the church. Because in that, your will is being done. And in that, we find our purpose for life. So we thank you, Lord, for what you're about to do in these young people. And we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.